Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. Jack Morrison hated Mondays. As a mechanic running a struggling garage on the outskirts of Dallas, he usually started the week with a backlog of broken-down cars and a stack of unpaid bills. But this Monday was different. The day began with an innocuous beep from his tablet, a message from an unfamiliar sender. Attention Jack Morrison. You are the sole beneficiary of the estate of Alden Morrison. Please report to the nearest Galactic Notary office within 72 hours to claim your inheritance. Jack frowned. Alden Morrison? The name tugged at a distant memory, a black sheep uncle who disappeared decades ago after ranting about aliens and secret missions. Everyone had written him off as a lunatic. Jack certainly had. Until now. Curiosity and the faint hope of financial relief drove Jack to investigate. Following the instructions, he drove to a desolate field where an unmarked ship awaited. It whisked him off into orbit faster than he could question his sanity. The Galactic Notary office turned out to be a gleaming station surrounded by the void of space. Jack was led into a sterile chamber where a six-legged alien with iridescent skin and a voice like chimes introduced itself as Notary Virtal. Your uncle was a remarkable individual, Virtal began, its antennae quivering. He amassed a considerable fortune in his travels. As his heir, you inherit not only his wealth but his obligations. Obligations? Jack asked warily. The doors behind him hissed open and in stepped Vela. Her presence filled the room like a storm cloud, tall, elegant, and unmistakably alien. Her skin shimmered with a pearlescent glow, and her silver eyes bore into Jack with unsettling intensity. I am Vela, she said, her voice melodic yet edged with steel. As per the customs of my people, I am bound to serve and protect my mate. You are now my mate. Jack gaped. Wait, what? I didn't sign up for this. Your uncle saved my life, Vela explained. In Anari culture, such a debt binds us irrevocably. Upon his passing, I am transferred to his successor. You. Hold on, Jack protested. You're not property. This isn't right. Vela tilted her head as if considering his words. An interesting perspective. One I will contemplate. Regardless, I am yours. Virtal cleared its throat, if that's what the sound was. Mr. Morrison, you have also inherited significant assets, including estates, starships, and holdings across the Helios sector. However, your uncle's death remains unresolved. It is suspected to involve foul play. Jack pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to process. Alien wealth? A wife? Murder? This was way beyond a bad Monday. What happens if I say no? He asked. Virtal's antennae drooped. You forfeit the inheritance. However, doing so would dishonor the Anari, and certain parties may not take kindly to such an affront. Vela's gaze softened. You are overwhelmed. I understand. But know this, by Anari law I am now all yours. And with me your uncle's enemies will come for you. Jack exhaled slowly. Well, looks like I've got no choice, do I? The notary's chimes sounded almost approving. Excellent. Let us proceed to the transfer ceremony. As Jack followed Vela into the next chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just become a lot more complicated and dangerous. Jack Morrison slumped into the luxurious captain's chair of the alien starship, Ecliptica, staring blankly at the controls. The ship hummed with an eerie smoothness, the kind of advanced technology that seemed to operate on pure thought rather than buttons and levers. Jack was still grappling with the idea that he owned it, or that he had an alien wife standing silently behind him. I still don't get it, Jack muttered, rubbing his temples. How does saving your life make you my wife? Vela stepped forward, her footsteps inaudible on the sleek floor. In my culture, the life debt is sacred. It is more than gratitude. It is a binding contract of service, loyalty, and unity. Your uncle saved me during a mission. In return, I was honor-bound to him. Upon his passing, my duty transfers to you. Jack turned in the chair to face her. But you don't even know me. How is that fair? What if I'm a terrible person? She raised an elegant brow, her silver eyes glinting. You accepted the inheritance. That act alone shows courage or perhaps recklessness. Both are traits my people respect. Jack snorted. More like desperation. My garage was one busted transmission away from bankruptcy. Vela tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Humans are intriguing. So emotional, so driven by circumstance. And yet, resilient. Before Jack could respond, the ship's holographic interface flared to life, projecting a three-dimensional map of the Helios sector. A calm, mechanical voice announced, destination coordinates pre-programmed, Morrison Estate. Arrival in 6 hours? Jack sighed. Great. Time to figure out what exactly I've gotten myself into. The Ecliptica was as vast as it was advanced, and Jack quickly learned that navigating it was like trying to find his way through a futuristic palace. Vela acted as his guide, leading him through corridors lined with shimmering panels and alien script. Their first stop was the armory, a room bristling with weapons Jack couldn't even begin to identify. Vela handled them with practiced ease, showing Jack how to activate a sleek, compact plasma blade. Your uncle was a warrior, she explained, spinning the blade in a fluid motion. He knew the risks of amassing wealth in the Helios sector. Many envied his success, and more than a few sought to end him. Jack watched her, equal parts impressed and unnerved. You make it sound like he was some kind of space cowboy. Vela gave a rare, almost smile. In a sense he was. But he was also wise. He knew the galaxy's dangers, which is why he left me to protect you. Jack hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at him. Do you think his death was murder? Vela's expression darkened. Without question. Alden Morrison was too skilled to fall victim to mere accident or illness. The timing of his death, just as he prepared to finalize an important deal, is no coincidence. Jack frowned. What kind of deal? One that would have disrupted the power balance in this sector, Vela said cryptically. You will learn more when we reach the estate. For now you must prepare. Prepare for what? Jack asked warily. She met his gaze, her silver eyes unyielding. For the enemies you have inherited along with his fortune. Later, in what Jack could only describe as the Ecliptica's living quarters, he sat across from Vela at a low, transparent table. A tray of food-like substances hovered between them, but Jack had little appetite. His mind churned with unanswered questions. Why didn't you just stay free? He blurted. You could have walked away when my uncle died. Vela's expression remained calm, but her tone was sharp. And dishonor myself? My family? The Anari do not break life debts. It is our way. Jack leaned back, frustration bubbling up. Your weight feels more like a gilded cage. Doesn't it bother you? Being handed from one person to another like property? Vela's gaze turned icy. Do not mistake my loyalty for weakness, Earthling. I'm not your prisoner. If anything, you are my responsibility now. Jack opened his mouth to retort but stopped himself. She was right. She had saved his life already on a ship he barely understood, in a galaxy he didn't belong in. He owed her at least that much respect. Before he could apologize, the ship's alarm system blared, and the calm voice returned. Incoming vessel detected. Hostile configuration. Evasive action advised. Jack's stomach dropped. Hostile? What does that mean? Vela was on her feet in an instant, her demeanor shifting from composed to lethal. It means someone does not want you to reach the estate alive. The holographic display showed a sleek, angular ship closing in fast. Lights blinked red across the interface as the enemy vessel locked onto them. Jack's hands clenched the armrests of his chair as adrenaline surged. Vela activated the ship's defensive systems with practiced precision, her fingers flying over glowing controls. Stay behind me, she ordered, her voice firm. Jack didn't argue. As the Ecliptica jolted under enemy fire, he realized just how far out of his depth he was. Vela, however, moved like she had done this 100 times before. This is your life now, Jack Morrison, she said without looking at him. Enemies, danger, and the weight of a legacy you didn't ask for. Are you ready for it? Jack gritted his teeth as the ship swerved violently. Do I have a choice? Vela smirked. No. But I will teach you to survive it. With that, she launched the ship into a daring maneuver, proving that she was more than just a bodyguard. She was a warrior. And Jack? He had a lot to learn. The Ecliptica shuddered as another blast from the enemy vessel grazed its shields. Jack clung to his seat, his heart pounding like a war drum. On the holographic display, the hostile ship loomed closer, its sleek black hull bristling with weapons. Why are they shooting at us? Jack shouted over the alarm. They want to kill you, Vela replied calmly, her hands flying over the controls. And take what you've inherited. Stay quiet. The Ecliptica banked hard to the right, avoiding another barrage of plasma fire. Vela activated the ship's countermeasures, sending a cluster of shimmering decoy drones into the void. The enemy ship hesitated, its weapons momentarily distracted. You're just gonna dodge forever? Jack asked, gripping the armrest. Vela's lips curved into a small smile. No. I was waiting for them to make a mistake. The enemy ship surged forward, closing the distance. Vela's fingers danced across the console, and the Ecliptica spun around in a dizzying arc. A sleek cannon emerged from the ship's undercarriage, glowing with a bright blue charge. "Now," she said, pressing a final button. A pulse of energy shot from the cannon, hitting the enemy ship square in its midsection. The vessel buckled and veered off course, its weapons silenced. Seconds later, it exploded in a silent bloom of fire and debris. Jack exhaled sharply. "Holy, you just destroyed them." Vela turned to him, her silver eyes unflinching. "If I hadn't, they would have destroyed us. Do not pity your enemies, Jack Morrison. They will not pity you." Jack swallowed hard, his pulse still racing. "Who were they?" "Mercenaries most likely hired by those who opposed your uncle. His wealth and influence made him many enemies. You are now a target by association." Jack leaned back, trying to absorb her words. "Great. Just great. I inherit a fortune and a hit list. Perfect." Vela's expression softened, a rare flicker of empathy crossing her features. "I understand this is overwhelming, but you must adapt. Your survival depends on it." The rest of the journey to the Morrison estate was mercifully uneventful. Jack spent the time exploring the ship under Vela's watchful eye, trying to wrap his head around the life he'd stumbled into. The estate was located on a lush, emerald-green moon orbiting a gas giant. As the Ecliptica descended, Jack's jaw dropped. The sprawling compound glittered like a jewel, its sleek towers and domed buildings surrounded by meticulously landscaped gardens. "This is mine?" Jack asked, incredulous. "Yours," Vela confirmed. "Alden Morrison built this estate as his sanctuary. He believed it would be safe here." Jack felt a pang of guilt. His uncle might have been a stranger to him, but the man clearly lived an extraordinary life, and now Jack was the custodian of it all. They landed on a circular platform, and a group of humanoid drones greeted them, bowing slightly as they disembarked. The estate's AI introduced itself as Nissa, its voice calm and welcoming. "Welcome, Jack Morrison. It is an honor to serve you as I did your predecessor. Shall I provide a tour of the estate?" Maybe later," Jack said, still taking in the grandeur. "Right now, I need answers." Vela nodded approvingly. "A wise choice. The estate's archives should contain everything your uncle left behind: records, plans, and perhaps clues about his enemies." The archives were housed in a massive underground chamber lined with glowing blue data panels. As Jack sifted through files, Vela stood guard, her ever-watchful presence both comforting and intimidating. Alden Morrison's records painted a picture of a man who was equal parts genius and rogue. He had made his fortune by discovering and exploiting alien technologies, often stepping on powerful toes in the process. One entry caught Jack's attention. Project Catalyst, a revolutionary energy source. Potential to disrupt galactic economies. Must proceed with caution. "What's this?" Jack asked, showing Vela the file. Her expression darkened as she read. "Catalyst. Your uncle mentioned it once. He believed it could provide free energy to entire star systems, breaking the monopoly of the Syndicate." "The Syndicate?" "A shadow organization controlling vast swathes of trade and resources. They thrive on scarcity and fear. If your uncle was working on something that threatened their power..." Jack completed her thought. "Then they'd kill to stop him." Vela nodded grimly. "And they won't stop with him. If they suspect you have access to Catalyst, they will come for you." As they left the archives, Jack's mind raced. He wasn't just inheriting wealth, he was stepping into a conspiracy that spanned the stars. Back in the main hall, a sharp sound interrupted his thoughts. A faint metallic clink, like a boot hitting the polished floor. Vela stiffened, her hand darting to the hilt of a plasma blade. "We're not alone," she whispered. The lights flickered, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was humanoid but clearly alien, its skin a mottled green and its eyes glowing yellow. It wore light armor and carried a weapon Jack didn't recognize. "Jack Morrison," the figure said, its voice low and gravelly. "You've inherited more than you can handle." Jack's pulse quickened as Vela stepped protectively in front of him. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The intruder smirked. "You'll find out soon enough, if you survive." Without warning, it lunged. Vela moved faster than Jack thought possible, meeting the attacker head-on. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed, and Jack could only watch in stunned silence. This wasn't just about wealth or legacy anymore. This was a fight for survival, and Jack was at the center of it. Jack stumbled backward, his heart pounding as Vela and the intruder's blades clashed in a storm of sparks. The alien assassin was fast, its movements precise and deadly. But Vela was faster. Her plasma blade arced through the air in a blur of light, deflecting every strike with a lethal grace that left Jack breathless. "Jack," Vela called over her shoulder, her voice steady despite the chaos, "find cover. Now." Jack didn't need to be told twice. He dove behind a nearby console, wincing as the sharp crack of weapons filled the air. He peeked out just in time to see Vela land a punishing kick to the assassin's midsection, sending it sprawling across the polished floor. The assassin rolled to its feet with fluid ease, its glowing yellow eyes narrowing. "You're skilled, Anari," it hissed. "But you can't protect him forever?" Vela didn't reply. She lunged forward, her blade a streak of light as it sliced through the air. The assassin dodged, but not quickly enough. Vela's strike grazed its shoulder, leaving a smoldering wound. The intruder growled, clutching its injury. "This isn't over," it spat, activating a device on its wrist. Before Vela could strike again, the assassin vanished in a flash of light, leaving behind only the acrid smell of burnt air. For a moment the room was silent, save for the faint hum of the estate's systems. Jack emerged from his hiding spot, his legs shaky. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice tinged with both fear and awe. Vela deactivated her blade and turned to him, her expression unreadable. "An assassin. Likely sent by the Syndicate to test your defenses. They will send more." Jack exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Fantastic. First space mercenaries, now assassins. What's next? A fleet of warships?" "Possibly," Vela said matter-of-factly, then added, "We need to prepare." Over the next few hours, Jack and Vela worked together to assess the estate's defenses. The compound was equipped with advanced security systems, force fields, automated turrets, and surveillance drones, but some areas were outdated or in need of repair. "This place is a fortress," Jack said, marveling at the technology. "Why didn't my uncle upgrade it?" "He relied on secrecy and his reputation to keep enemies at bay," Vela explained. "But with his death, the Syndicate sees an opportunity. They will test every weakness." Jack frowned. "And they're not just after the money, are they? They want catalyst." Vela nodded. "Your uncle's project was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a threat to their power. If they believe you have access to it, they will stop at nothing to eliminate you." Jack leaned against the console, his mind racing. He wasn't a soldier or a strategist, he was a mechanic from Dallas. How was he supposed to fight a shadowy galactic syndicate? As if sensing his doubts, Vela stepped closer. "You're not alone in this, Jack. I swore to protect you and I will. But you must be willing to fight as well." Jack met her gaze, seeing the determination in her silver eyes. "I don't even know how to fight, Vela. I can barely work a plasma blade without cutting myself." "Then we'll start with what you do know," she said. "You're an engineer, are you not? Use that." Over the following days, Jack threw himself into fortifying the estate. He adapted alien technology with a mechanic's ingenuity, repairing outdated systems and devising new defenses. With Vela's guidance, he learned to pilot drones, calibrate energy shields, and even operate some of the estate's weaponry. Vela, in turn, began training him in combat. They sparred in the estate's training hall, her movements swift and precise as she guided him through basic techniques. "Balance your weight," she instructed, stepping behind him to adjust his stance. "A strong foundation is everything." Jack tried to mimic her movements, but his strikes were clumsy and slow. "I'm not exactly a natural at this," he muttered. "Skill takes time," Vela said, her tone patient. "But determination will carry you further than talent alone." Despite his frustrations, Jack found himself improving. His strikes became more precise, his reflexes sharper. He still had a long way to go, but for the first time he felt like he could hold his own, at least for a few minutes. One evening, as they stood on the estate's observation deck, Jack looked out at the sprawling compound, illuminated by the soft glow of the moon's twin suns. "You know," he said, "this isn't exactly the life I imagined for myself." Vela tilted her head, her expression curious. "And what life did you imagine?" "Fixing cars, maybe settling down with someone normal." "Not this." He gestured to the alien skyline. Vela's lips quirked into a faint smile. "Normal is overrated." Jack chuckled despite himself. "You might be right about that." They stood in silence for a moment, the tension of the past days momentarily forgotten. Then Vela spoke, her tone uncharacteristically soft. "You've adapted well, Jack. Most humans would have crumbled under this pressure." Jack shrugged. "I guess I don't have much of a choice." "Perhaps," she said, turning to face him. "But choice or not, you've proven yourself capable. And that is no small thing." Jack met her gaze, feeling a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude? Respect? maybe even trust. Well, he said, breaking the moment, let's just hope it's enough to keep me alive. Vela's smile widened ever so slightly. With me at your side it will be. For the first time since this all began, Jack believed her. Weeks passed in a blur of training, repairs, and strategy sessions. Jack had grown used to the routine of life at the Morrison estate, a strange blend of luxury and constant vigilance. He worked side by side with Vela, learning everything from advanced engineering to combat tactics. Though he hadn't fully come to terms with his new life, he had started to accept that survival, and perhaps even success, depended on him embracing his role in this galactic power struggle. But despite the peace they'd carved out, Jack knew it wouldn't last forever. The Syndicate was out there waiting. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the estate, the calm was shattered. "Nissa," Jack said, his voice low as he stepped into the central command room, "any activity in the system?" The AI's calm voice echoed from the ship's speakers. "Scanning, multiple hostile ships detected on an intercept course. They appear to be Syndicate vessels." Jack's stomach dropped. He looked up to see Vela already at the console, her hands flying over the controls as she activated the estate's defense systems. "We've been waiting for this," she said, her expression grim. "Prepare yourself, Jack. It's time to fight." Jack nodded, his pulse quickening. He wasn't ready for this, not completely, but he had no choice. Vela turned to him. "Stay close. If they breach the outer defenses, I need you to act fast. I'll be with you." Jack swallowed. "Right. Got it." The first strike came in the form of a barrage of plasma blasts that hit the outer shields with a deafening crack. The estate's defense systems flickered and hummed, absorbing the attack but only just. "They're testing us," Vela said, her voice sharp. "Prepare for their main assault." Jack watched as the holographic map of the compound displayed the incoming Syndicate fleet, 3 large ships and several smaller fighters, all closing in fast. The estate's shield was holding for now, but it wouldn't last long against such a concentrated attack. "Can we outrun them?" Jack asked, his hands hovering over the console. "No," Vela replied bluntly. "The Ecliptica is our only escape route, but I don't intend to abandon this place." "Then what do we do?" Vela's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something, an unspoken understanding, a mutual resolve. "We stand our ground?" As the Syndicate ships moved into position, Jack and Vela moved quickly through the estate, activating automated turrets and triggering energy fields that surrounded key areas. The air was thick with tension as the countdown to impact ticked away. Jack had never fought a battle like this, but he'd trained alongside one of the best. Vela's confidence fueled his own, even if the odds were overwhelming. They took their positions by the estate's main entrance, the reinforced doors humming with energy as they powered up. Jack glanced at Vela, who was already assessing the battlefield through the various surveillance screens. "We need to split their focus," she said, her tone decisive. "If we can lure some of their smaller fighters into the estate's secondary defensive grids, we'll have a better chance of holding them off." Jack nodded, his hands shaking as he gripped a plasma rifle. "And if it doesn't work?" Vela gave him a sharp look. "Then we fight." Jack didn't say anything more, but his heart raced. He wasn't the soldier Vela was. He wasn't even sure if he was ready for this. But in that moment, standing next to her, he realized something. He could do this. He had to. The first wave of Syndicate fighters swooped in like vultures, their sleek ships darting toward the estate. Jack fired the plasma rifle, sending bolts of energy streaking across the yard, hitting one of the smaller ships. It jerked violently to the side, losing control before crashing into the ground in a burst of flames. "That's one down," Jack muttered, though the victory felt hollow as the remaining fighters closed in. Vela was already moving, her movements a blur as she fired energy bolts from a turret at the incoming ships. With every shot, another Syndicate vessel exploded, but there were too many. "They're trying to overwhelm us," Vela said, her voice cold as she switched between weapon systems. "Keep firing." Jack didn't need any more encouragement. He squeezed the trigger, blasting another fighter out of the sky. But they were relentless, and the Syndicate's firepower was devastating. Just as the estate's shields began to flicker, indicating they were close to being breached, Vela spoke again. "Get to the control room. I'll hold them off." "What?" Jack's voice was urgent. "I can't leave you here alone." "You can," she said, locking eyes with him. "I've trained you for this moment. You can't hesitate. The control room is the key to turning the tide." Without waiting for a response, she sprinted toward another section of the compound, firing as she went. Jack stood there for a moment, torn between the need to stay and fight and the instinct to follow her orders. But then he realized she was right. If he was going to survive, he had to step up. He had to trust himself. Racing through the hallways, Jack arrived at the control room just as the Syndicate forces launched another round of bombardment. The control room was lined with massive holographic interfaces, each one showing critical information about the estate's defenses. He quickly accessed the systems, trying to recall the details Vela had taught him. The Syndicate had already begun breaching the outer gates, and Jack could see their forces advancing. His heart hammered in his chest, but he knew what he had to do. He initiated the override on the secondary defense grids, triggering an EMP pulse that would disable the Syndicate's smaller ships for a brief window. The moment he pressed the button, the lights in the control room flickered, and the estate's defenses roared to life. A shockwave rippled outward from the estate's core, hitting the Syndicate fighters in a brilliant pulse. They were momentarily stunned. Jack barely had time to react before he heard the sound of running footsteps behind him. Vela had returned, her face determined but bloodied from the skirmish. "Well done, Jack," she said, giving him a rare, approving smile. "Now let's finish this." Jack nodded, his fear replaced with a sense of purpose. The Syndicate was about to learn that underestimating him, and his new allies, was their biggest mistake. The EMP pulse had given them a precious moment to regroup, but the Syndicate's forces were far from defeated. They regrouped, repairing their ships and reorganizing their assault. The estate's outer defenses were strong, but Jack knew they were only temporary measures against an enemy this relentless. Vela stood at the center of the command room, her silver eyes scanning the data feeds as she monitored the Syndicate's movements. Jack had never seen her so focused, but there was a steely edge to her determination. "They're coming for the main structure now," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "We have to hold them at the gates?" Jack nodded, his pulse quickening. He wasn't a soldier, but he was learning to think like one. The Syndicate wouldn't just give up. They'd press harder, exploit every weakness. And Vela was right. The gates were the first line of defense. "Get to the turret stations," she instructed, turning to Jack. "We'll take out their heavy ships before they can breach the inner walls." Jack didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted for the nearest turret station, his hands trembling as he input the access codes. The holographic targeting interface flickered to life, showing a dozen Syndicate vessels closing in on their position. Their capital ship was flanked by several heavily armed cruisers. Jack's fingers hovered over the controls as the targeting system locked onto the first cruiser. His mind raced. He couldn't afford to hesitate now. He fired. A massive blast of energy shot from the turret, striking the cruiser square in its side. The ship's shields flared briefly before crumbling under the assault. The cruiser exploded in a violent burst of fire, its wreckage tumbling through space. "Good shot," Vela's voice crackled over the comms. "But don't get too comfortable. We need more hits to turn the tide." Jack's heart was racing, but he didn't allow himself a moment of victory. He targeted the next cruiser, firing again. This time, the Syndicate ship tried to retaliate, launching a volley of missiles toward the estate's outer walls. Jack watched the projectiles approach, his eyes wide. He could see the missiles locking onto the estate's position. "Vela, they're launching missiles." Jack yelled into the comms. "Deploy countermeasures," she ordered. Jack didn't waste any time. He accessed the estate's anti-missile defense system, activating a series of electromagnetic pulses that created a field around the estate. The pulses detonated the incoming missiles mid-flight, sending their fiery remains into space. One down, but Jack knew they wouldn't stop. The Syndicate was relentless. The battle raged on for what felt like hours. Syndicate fighters darted in and out, launching bombing runs and strafing the estate's defenses. The turrets continued to fire, taking down ships one after another, but the Syndicate had more firepower than they could handle. "Vela, what's the next move?" Jack asked, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. Vela was standing next to him now, her eyes locked on the battlefield outside. She had a plan, Jack could tell. "We need to go on the offensive," she said, her voice cool and collected. "We can't let them control the skies. I'll take a fighter and draw them away. You will stay here and continue holding the turrets. Once I'm in position, I'll disable their lead ship. You'll need to finish off the rest." Jack turned to her, eyes wide. "Wait, you're going out there?" She met his gaze without flinching. "It's the only way. Trust me." For a moment, Jack wanted to argue. But the look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. This was their best shot, his best shot, at turning the tide. "All right," he said, nodding. Just be careful." Vela's lips curled into a rare half-smile. "Always?" She grabbed a set of keys from a nearby terminal and handed them to him. "If I don't make it back, you'll need to finish this." "I'll finish it," Jack said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. Vela swiftly made her way to the fighter bay, her every movement deliberate and confident. She knew the stakes. If she didn't disrupt the Syndicate's assault, the estate wouldn't last much longer. The fighter she chose was one of the fastest models in the estate's fleet, an advanced prototype capable of stealth maneuvers and heavy bombardment. The engines roared to life as she lifted off, shooting into the sky. Jack watched the feed from the surveillance systems, his stomach nodding as the small fighter became a speck in the vastness of space. "She's out there," Jack muttered under his breath. "Just hold on." Outside the estate, Vela's fighter was darting through enemy fire, evading the Syndicate's ships with fluid precision. Her weapons locked onto the lead ship, a massive Syndicate cruiser bristling with turrets and energy cannons. Her heart raced, but her focus never wavered. The Syndicate's flagship was the key. If she could disable it, the rest of their forces would be forced to retreat. With a swift maneuver, Vela fired a series of torpedoes, targeting the cruiser's engine cores. The ship's shields flared as the torpedoes hit, but Vela had calculated the trajectory perfectly. The shields flickered and failed, and the torpedoes slammed into the ship's reactor core. The explosion that followed was spectacular. The cruiser's entire rear section detonated, sending debris flying in all directions. The Syndicate ships nearby were thrown into disarray, their formation breaking apart as they scrambled to avoid the wreckage. Vela's comms crackled with static as Jack's voice came through. "Nice shot. The rest of the fleet is scattering." "Good," she said, her tone sharp. "But we're not finished yet. Let's finish this." Back at the estate, Jack was in the heat of battle, firing relentlessly at the remaining Syndicate fighters. With Vela's strike against their flagship, their cohesion was shattered, and Jack took full advantage. The turrets continued to rip through their ranks, and the Syndicate fighters began retreating one by one. "We're doing it," Jack said under his breath, a smile tugging at his lips. "We're actually doing it." But just as victory seemed within reach, a new signal appeared on the radar. Jack's smile faded. Another ship, larger than anything they had seen before, was emerging from the edge of the system. It was a warship, a behemoth of metal and firepower, equipped with weapons that could decimate entire fleets. And it was heading straight for the estate. "Vela, we've got a big problem," Jack said, his voice tight with panic. "You need to get back here. Now." But as the warship loomed closer, Jack realized that even with all their efforts, the fight wasn't over yet. And the Syndicate had one final card to play. The moment Jack saw the warship emerge from the edge of the system, his stomach sank. The size and firepower of the ship were unlike anything he had imagined. It was massive, towering over the remaining Syndicate fighters like a predator closing in on its prey. The sheer scale of it made the Syndicate's previous assault seem like a skirmish in comparison. "Vela, you have to get back here now." Jack's voice crackled with urgency as he watched the warship's weapons power up. His hands were shaking as he input commands into the console, trying to make sense of the overwhelming flood of data. "They're going to fire any second." Vela's voice came through the comms, her tone steady despite the dire situation. "I'm on my way, Jack. Hold them off as long as you can. I'll be there." He felt a pang of helplessness as he looked out at the approaching warship. The Syndicate wasn't just trying to take the estate anymore, they were going to destroy it. And even with all the advanced technology at his disposal, Jack knew they couldn't fight this warship head-on. The estate's outer defenses were already weakened, and the warship's firepower was enough to obliterate their last line of defense in a single strike. Jack frantically searched for a solution, his mind racing. He was a mechanic, not a strategist. How could they survive this? How could they stop something this powerful? Then, as if a light bulb flickered on in his mind, Jack remembered something. Catalyst. His uncle's research. Jack had spent hours studying the data his uncle had left behind. He knew Catalyst was the key to the Syndicate's interest in the estate. His uncle's project wasn't just about technology, it was about power, about unlocking something so valuable that it could shift the balance of the entire galaxy. And Jack realized something else. Catalyst wasn't just in the form of scientific research. It was buried in the estate's systems, hidden in plain sight. "Vela," Jack said, his voice now focused, "I think I have an idea." "I'm listening," she replied, her tone sharp and ready for anything. "I can access the estate's internal systems," Jack said, tapping into the control panel. "There's a backup system, something I think my uncle left hidden. If I can get into it, I can activate something that could take down their warship. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Vela was silent for a moment, then her voice came through, resolute. Do it. I'll cover you. As the warship loomed closer, its enormous cannons beginning to charge up, Jack's fingers flew over the console, searching for the hidden access point. His heart raced. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now. The countdown to impact was ticking away, and he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The warship's weapons fired, sending massive energy blasts toward the estate. Jack watched as the first wave of firepower slammed into the estate's outer shields, causing them to flare and flicker with resistance. The entire estate shook under the force, and for a moment, Jack thought they might lose it all in a single instant. But the shields held. Jack exhaled sharply and refocused. He dug deeper into the system, bypassing firewalls and triggering ancient security protocols. His uncle had designed this system with layers of protection, every layer a potential trap for someone trying to access it. Jack had no idea how many times he'd have to outsmart these defenses before he found the right access point. But just as the warship charged its weapons for another strike, Jack's screen lit up with a familiar symbol. Got it? Jack shouted, a surge of adrenaline flooding his veins. He didn't waste any time. He activated the system, sending a surge of power into the estate's central core. Energy pulsed outward, and Jack's mind raced as he initiated the final sequence. Outside, the warship's weaponry flared to life again. This time there was no hesitation in its attack. It was going for the kill. The massive beams of energy fired, their immense power threatening to tear through everything in their path. But as the first beam shot toward the estate's shield, something unexpected happened. The air seemed to crackle with energy. The estate's defensive grid flared as a deep hum resonated through the ground. A massive surge of power pulsed outward from the estate's core, colliding with the incoming beam in a dazzling explosion of light. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, as if time itself had frozen, the warship's weapons began to misfire. A pulse of energy, like an enormous shockwave, ripped through the warship's systems. Sparks erupted from its hull, and its cannons sputtered and fell silent. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had done it. On the ground, Vela watched as the warship shuddered, its once mighty weapons suddenly rendered useless. The Syndicate crew scrambled to assess the damage, but it was too late. The estate systems had triggered a cascading energy overload, and the warship was on the brink of collapse. This is it, Jack, Vela said into the comms. Now's our chance. Let's finish it. Jack didn't hesitate. He slammed his hand down on the final sequence, activating the estate's backup weapon system, the one designed for just this kind of situation. A massive laser cannon hidden deep within the estate's core, powered up with an immense hum. It tracked the warship's weakening position, locking onto its power core. Jack, are you sure about this? Vela's voice came through, full of tension. It's our only shot, Jack said, his voice steady. Let's end this. The cannon fired. The shot was perfect. A beam of energy as bright as a star lanced through the distance between the estate and the warship, striking the Syndicate vessel's main reactor. The ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, disintegrating in a blinding flash of light. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, slowly, the debris of the warship drifted into space, leaving the estate standing in the void, battered but victorious. Vela's voice crackled through the comms again, softer this time. You did it, Jack. We did it. Jack leaned back in the chair, his body numb with exhaustion. His hands were still trembling from the rush of the battle, but he couldn't suppress the grin that spread across his face. We did, he said, his voice hoarse. But I think I might need a vacation after this. Vela laughed softly, the sound like music in the silence of the command room. A vacation would be good. But we've got more work to do. The Syndicate won't stop. But for now. She didn't finish the sentence, but Jack didn't need her to. He knew. For now they had won. And that was enough. As he sat there, staring out into the void, he realized one thing. No matter what came next, he wasn't alone in this fight. And together, with Vela by his side, they had a chance. A chance to fight back against the Syndicate, and anyone else who would threaten their future. And for the first time since he had inherited his uncle's estate, Jack felt something he hadn't in a long time. The warship's destruction sent ripples through the remaining Syndicate forces, but Jack and Vela knew the fight wasn't over. Even as the wreckage of the Syndicate flagship drifted into the cold emptiness of space, Jack's mind was still racing. He could hear the hum of the estate's systems, now quieter after the battle, and he could feel the weight of the moment settling over him. They'd survived the first wave, but what came next? We've won the battle, but not the war, Jack said, his voice laced with caution as he wiped sweat from his brow. He turned to Vela, who was standing beside him, watching the aftermath of their victory. She hadn't said much since the warship's explosion, but her gaze spoke volumes. "I know," Vela replied, her voice calm but sharp. "This was just a preview of what's to come. The Syndicate will regroup and they'll come after us harder next time." Jack exhaled slowly. "We barely held them off. I'm not sure we can do it again with the estate in its current condition." Vela turned to him, her gaze focused. "Then we need to prepare. We can't afford to wait for them to strike again. We've got the upper hand right now. We've got Catalyst and with it, everything the Syndicate wants." Jack hesitated, the weight of the truth sinking in. He'd known Catalyst was important, but it wasn't until now that he truly grasped its significance. His uncle's work wasn't just valuable, it was unstoppable in the wrong hands. And the Syndicate was the last group Jack wanted getting their hands on it. "How do we prepare?" Jack asked, his voice quiet but resolute. "What's the next move?" Vela's eyes flickered to the communications panel. "We'll need to go on the offensive, Jack. We need to take the fight to them before they can muster another fleet. But we can't do it alone. We'll need allies." Jack's heart quickened. "Allies? Who could we trust? Everyone's out for themselves. The Syndicate has the resources to destroy entire planets, and we barely survived their last strike." Vela placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "There are always others. We just need to find them. And we can use Catalyst to make them see reason." It was a gamble. No one had seen the Syndicate's full power, but the information Jack had uncovered in his uncle's research showed that Catalyst could shift the balance of power not just in the galaxy, but in ways that could threaten entire factions. The Syndicate knew this, and their interest in the estate wasn't just for its wealth, it was for the potential to control the most advanced technology in existence. "We can't hide forever," Jack muttered, his thoughts racing. "If we're going to stand a chance, we need to take a bold step. But I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Are we ready for that?" Vela's gaze softened. "You've already proven you're ready. Now it's about trust. Trust in yourself and in the people who believe in what we're fighting for." Jack clenched his fists, the weight of the responsibility growing heavier with each passing moment. He didn't have the luxury of indecision anymore. If they were going to survive, they had to act fast, and decisively. The strategy meeting was tense. As Vela had predicted, there were others who were willing to join their cause, though the groups were small. The first to respond to Vela's encrypted message was a rebel faction known as the Vanguard. Led by Commander Soren, a former Syndicate officer who had defected after seeing the brutal tactics used by the Syndicate, the Vanguard had resources but lacked the necessary power to take on the Syndicate's fleet. "We need to meet with them," Vela said, her tone firm. "The Vanguard has the military presence we need. We can't fight the Syndicate with just our estate." Jack nodded. "And how do we know they'll trust us?" "We make them an offer they can't refuse," Vela replied. "Catalyst is the key. If we can convince them of its value, they'll join us." Jack hesitated. Trust was a fragile thing, especially in a galaxy ruled by greed and power. He understood the stakes, but every new alliance came with risks. The Syndicate had spies everywhere, and Vela's contacts could be compromised just as easily as anyone else's. "All right," Jack said, standing up straighter. "Let's meet them. But we do this carefully. We can't afford to make any more mistakes." The meeting with Commander Soren was held in a neutral location, a secluded asteroid base far from the Syndicate's reach. The Vanguard had been operating in the shadows, making small strikes against the Syndicate's supply lines, but they lacked the firepower to make a real impact. The Vanguard had lost too many good men and women to be complacent, and that made them dangerous allies. Soren was a tall, broad-shouldered man, his face marked with the scars of countless battles. He looked at Jack and Vela with suspicion, but there was something in his eyes, an understanding of the war they were all caught in. "I've heard the rumors," Soren said, leaning forward across the table. "Catalyst. The Syndicate's been after it for years. You say you have it? Prove it?" Jack hesitated for only a moment before he activated the holographic display. The image of Catalyst flickered into existence in front of them. It was a complex, intricate system of data, seemingly alive, shifting and evolving before their eyes. Soren didn't flinch. "I don't need a demonstration, Jack. We know what Catalyst can do. But it's not just power that's important, it's control. Can you control it?" Jack met Soren's gaze, the weight of the question pressing down on him. "I don't know. But if we don't, the Syndicate will. And if they do, there won't be anything left for anyone else." Soren studied him for a long moment before nodding. "You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. All right, I'm in. But you need to understand something. We're not fighting for glory or for the Alliance. We're fighting for survival. You make this work and we're with you. Fail and we all die. Jack nodded, feeling the gravity of the decision settle into his bones. They had one chance, one final gamble, to turn the tide against the Syndicate. With the Vanguard's support and Catalyst at their side, they had a chance to shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. But with the Syndicate lurking in the shadows, Jack knew the battle ahead wouldn't just be fought with weapons. It would be fought with minds, with strategy, and with everything they had. Then we fight, Jack said, his voice steady. We fight for the future. We fight to take back what's ours. As Soren and his men gave their approval, Jack turned to Vela, who was standing beside him, her eyes full of resolve. Are you ready for this? Jack asked, the weight of the moment hanging between them. Vela smiled faintly, her silver eyes glinting. I've been ready since the day we met, Jack. And in that moment, Jack knew the fight for the galaxy's future had only just begun. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.